Shabbat Shalom. The story is told of a school very similar to Hillel Day School, a beautiful new community Jewish day school with all of the modern additions. So sure enough, it is when a relatively new teacher is seeking to open the door to the closet that has all the technology in it. And she comes to the door, and sure enough, she looks at the door, and there in the door is a passcode to punch in, 18 numbers long. And she's looking at it and pounding herself on the forehead saying, I never remember the right combination. I can never remember the right combination to this passcode. So she tries a few numbers, it doesn't work. She tries again, it doesn't work. So sure enough, she goes to the principal down the hallway and says, Principal, would you mind coming to help me? And the principal says, no problem, I'm glad to come and help. So she walks over, the principal walks over to the technology closet, and there is the 18-digit passcode sitting in front of her. And she looks up to the heavens like this, punches in a few numbers, looks up again, punches in a few more numbers, looks up yet again, and punches in the rest of the code, and sure enough, wouldn't you know, the door opens right away. Well, now the new teacher is in awe. She said, you must have such a powerful connection to God, that God would be sending you these numbers so you could remember the right combination. The principal looked at the teacher and said, my faith truly is strong, but I also wrote the combination on the ceiling. Today I want to take a few minutes to talk about the right combination. Because our Torah portion this week, Parashat Lekh-L'kha, causes us to juxtapose Avram Avinu, Abraham, our patriarch, with Noah in last week's Torah portion. Now, as we know from last week's Torah portion, it says that Noach, Ish hayat tzadik tamim b'dorotav, that he was a truly righteous person, b'dorotav, in his generation. But when we come to Abraham, there's no such qualifier as b'dorotav in his generation. Abraham is just considered an ish tzaddik, a righteous person. So our rabbis come to ask the question, why is it that Noah was considered righteous only in his generation, but Abraham was considered righteous for all time? And one of the things that our rabbis come to really point to is that when God said to Noah, this man of faith, when God said to Noah, I'm going to destroy the earth, everything but you and your family, go build a boat. What did Noah do? He went and he built a boat. He had enough faith to believe that God was going to do what God had promised, and he followed orders exactly as commanded. Noah went and built a boat for his family. We see a similar situation when we come to Avram Avinu, when we come to Abraham, our patriarch. God says to Abraham, Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And does Abraham follow Noah's path and just say, okay? No. Abraham argues. Abraham says, how can the judge of all the earth not pursue justice? Abraham calls out God and says, what you're looking to do, God, is unjust. This is not what righteousness means. And in that moment, we come to see that Abraham is concerned much more than just about his family and his own well-being. Abraham is concerned for justice for all. Noah was concerned just with his family. Abraham was concerned with everybody. And that is why Abraham is considered the great patriarch, the great righteous human being of all time, whereas Noah was really just righteous for his own age. Now, as I was learning, I came across another interesting commentary, a much more modern commentary from the son of the Khatam Sofer. This was a couple hundred years ago in Europe. Now, what we have to know about the Khatam Sofer, not even a couple hundred years ago, a century or so ago in Europe, what we need to know about the Khatam Sofer is that he was a religious Jew combating against liberal Judaism. He didn't want things to change. So the son of the Khatam Sofer, who inherited his father's legacy, inverted the traditional teaching about Abraham being more righteous than Noah, and he came to say, look how righteous Noah was. Noah built an ark closed in on all sides to keep everybody else out, whereas Abraham built a tent open on all sides to let everybody in. Look how problematic of a world Abraham created when you open the doors and let everybody in, whereas Noah kept the walls closed. That, of course, is not a traditional reading, but it's a very interesting reading for its time. Noah as compared to Abraham, Abraham as compared to Noah. Noah was righteous in his day because he worried about his family and his family only. Abraham righteous for all time because his heart was open to everybody. If we move forward a little bit in our Torah and compare Abraham not just backward to Noah, but actually forward to the greatest man of faith known for the rest of our Sefer Torah, it's Moshe Rabbeinu, it's Moses the rabbi. If we compare Abraham to Moses, we see some similarity. Abraham and Moses were both strangers, born in a strange land. But where Abraham and Moses differ is that Abraham had this incredible faith. And in his faith and in seeing God everywhere, Abraham took that faith and Lekh-L'kha went forward in his faith to bring justice to the world. Moses, however, Moses started from a point of justice. Right? Moses saw the Hebrew slave being beaten by his Egyptian taskmaster, and Moses rose up against the oppression. Moses began with justice, and seeing this profound injustice in this world, actually moved forward to a life of faith. Both Abraham and Moses moved forward. Abraham from faith to justice, Moses from justice to faith. And of course, as we take one step backward and compare them both to Noah, we see in the word Noah the meaning pleasantness, comfort. Our rabbis also read that as complacency, staying in just one spot. Whereas in this week's Torah portion, Parashat Lekh-L'kha, Abraham is commanded to move forward, to go forward. So Abraham starts with faith and moves forward to justice. Moses follows Abraham's path and starts with justice and seeing a profound sense of injustice around him. And in battling that injustice, moves forward to faith. Abraham and Moshe were people who moved forward on their journeys. Noah was a person just concerned with himself and therefore really stayed in one place. Now, if we take another look at our Torah portion this morning, Parashat Lekh-L'kha, we see a similar comparison to Lot. You remember the story of Lot. Lot is known best of all for what happened later on with regard to his daughters and trying to repopulate the world. But if we look at the story of Lot and his daughters, what we see is something very interesting. Lot's family is rich. Abraham and Sarah, they're rich too. This family, Abraham is Lot's uncle, they come out of Egypt incredibly wealthy with cattle, with animals of all sorts. And sure enough, when Abraham and Lot are back in the land of Israel, they say, this land isn't big enough for the two of us. So Abraham says to his nephew, look, you choose. You go in any direction you want. I'll go in the opposite direction. So sure enough, Lot chooses to go south and brings with him his riches, all of his cattle, his animals, and he brings with him his wife and his two daughters. And we know what happens next with regard to Sodom and Gomorrah with Sodom and Amorah. Right? Here we see Lot chooses to go and follow his prosperity. But within a matter of years, has done very little. And so it is that when God comes down to Abraham and says to Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham and God go back in their negotiation that we read about in next week's Torah portion, we come to see that Abraham and God agree that if there are only 10 righteous people in all of Sodom and Gomorrah, God will save the cities. So what we see is that Lot followed his prosperity, took 4 people with him who were righteous, presumably righteous, his wife, his kids, himself, but couldn't even convince 6 other people to become more faithful. couldn't even convince 6 other people to pursue justice. And as a result, God comes in and destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot is a lot like Noah. Noah was content with his family. He did what was good for his family. Lot was content with his riches. He did what was good for his riches. But their failure to pursue faith, their failure to pursue justice, ultimately led to destruction. Whereas Avram Avinu, Abraham, and Moses went forward in their journeys, not just within their family and not just concerned for their own riches, but in concern for their people and the world. They pursued justice. They pursued faith. And so this Shabbat of Parashat Lekh-L'kha, I'd like to encourage us to think about how we in our own lives can get beyond just what our family needs. How we in our own lives can get beyond just what's good for our own personal prosperity. And ask, how can we Lekh-L'kha? How can we go forward from a place of faith to justice? Or from a desire to pursue justice in a world filled with injustice in order to increase our faith? May we be blessed in our journey. May we be empowered like Abraham and Moshe before us to follow those words, Lekh-L'kha. And may we not only walk alongside God as Noah walked alongside God, but may we, like Abraham, walk before God, pursuing a life of faith, pursuing a life of justice. Kein Yiratzon, may this be God's will, and let us say together, Amen.